Do you remember the cardboard castles from our childhood? The ones that were better than any Fisher-Price playhouse, precisely because we painstakingly cut them out, held them together with duct tape, and decorated them with our own hands. Unlike the fancy plastic houses our parents bought, these could be endlessly changed and expanded, with a little creativity and a few cardboard boxes our neighbors were about to throw away. If you were lucky enough to get a refrigerator box, your status was set as cool, at least for a few weeks. Feeling nostalgic now? Good. You're in the same mood I was before my happy childhood memories of cardboard and tape were forever darkened. So, my story. 3 years ago, my parents decided that we were going to move. My sisters and I approached it cautiously because our parents were notoriously disorganized and never carried out their plans without significant delays. But, actually, they soon started renovations on our old family mansion in upstate New York, which they needed to sell. At that time, I was working at a fairly well-known clothing store in Chicago, and it was common for us to receive 15 to 30 boxes of goods every weekday. They were large boxes which, after being emptied, would simply end up in the trash. I took some home and began hoarding them in the basement of the mansion, assuming they might be useful if my parents truly meant to move. One night, after my sister Sophia picked me up from work, we carried a few of the flattened boxes down to the basement, and I started thinking about the really great cardboard tunnel that my cousins and I had built as children. It extended through the entire basement with many nooks and crannies, and we were allowed to paint it as we liked. Of course, we spent months playing with that thing. Recalling that, I glanced uncertainly at our growing pile of boxes, and then at Sophia, and voiced an idea that we both definitely considered. "Sophia," I said, "we could build a really cool cardboard fort out of these." Before you ask how clever my sisters and I were, given that we amused ourselves with a cardboard fort, let me say that it was initially mainly a joke, a sort of, wouldn't it be hilarious if we did that? But yes, we really got excited about it. We were a pretty creative family, so the building part was mostly fun. It wasn't like we spent hours there playing house or anything. We built it upstairs. Our first 8 boxes served as a tunnel between the rooms of my 2 sisters, Emily and Sophia, with a little door to the bathroom and another tunnel that led to my room. We grabbed markers and doodled all over them, hung up funny pictures, and Sophia even strung up some Christmas lights, which created a nice effect. Any 4-year-old would have been proud to call that cardboard fort their own. I brought more boxes home. We extended the tunnels, made them more elaborate, and added curves at the end so you could never see the entrance from the inside unless you crawled to the very end. We even covered the whole thing with blankets to make it cozier and to keep the light out from the small gaps and openings. Our dog, Buddy, was initially scared, but joined our cardboard fort club as soon as the 3 of us crawled inside to read spooky stories. He didn't want to be left out. It was really dark in there. We usually brought flashlights, and almost every time we crawled through, we burst out laughing, mainly because the 3 of us fully grown girls were crawling through a cardboard fort. I mention that only to show that despite the utter darkness and claustrophobic tightness, there was none of that palpable atmosphere of terror, foreboding, and malevolence that often accompanies spooky places. At that time, it was still completely ordinary and fun, although it was nearly impossible to get any of us to crawl through it at night to get to the bathroom when the mansion was quiet and everyone was asleep. My parents were understandably annoyed by the massive blockade in the hallway, which they had to jump over to get to their room, the laundry room, and our bathroom, but they generally accepted our pranks and only threatened once or twice to tear the fort down. Still, we decided that we weren't satisfied with our cardboard fort because we wanted to build an epic one. Since space in our bedrooms was already taken up, only the hallway to our parents' bedroom remained. the one they would never approve of as long as we lived in the mansion. Fortunately, they were going to be away for a week. Exactly then, we filled the empty floor space in their bedroom and closet with the cardboard fort, and it was precisely then that the strange things began to happen. It developed gradually. We hung silly pictures there, or did other random things, and then we heard a scraping from one of the many branching tunnels. We assumed it was Buddy looking for us, but after calling him and searching, it turned out he was lying on a sunny spot on the couch and no one knew how long he'd been there. Once, Emily and I were hanging paper bats that we had cut out, and we heard the scraping from afar. "Buddy, Buddy," I shouted. "That isn't him." "What are you talking about?" I said, confused, as her face suddenly looked scared. "That's not Buddy. Emily walked him. They're both gone." I stared at her for a moment, remembered how Emily had mentioned taking the dog out not too long ago, and then both of us ran to the nearest exit. As soon as we were outside the fort, we burst into laughter, feeling ridiculous now that we were safe. "Do you think it's mice or something?" asked Sophia, wrinkling her nose. I said I didn't think so. The place was pretty clean, and there had never been mice in the mansion, but there had to be another explanation. The sound was coming from the part that led into our parents' laundry room, a large built-in closet with a window to the backyard. "This window is open. I bet it was just the breeze rustling the boxes." A completely logical explanation we were happy to believe. That night, as I lay in bed, my gaze kept drifting to the entrance of the fort. It was really dark there, and something about having that yawning black tunnel in my room made me feel very vulnerable. Finally, I turned over and slept on the other side, but mentally made a note to cover it with a sheet the next day. On the second day, without our parents, I used the grocery money to buy ingredients for a cookie decorating extravaganza, so I was in the kitchen with Sophia baking them. We had a movie playing at the same time, so it was a bit loud there, and we didn't hear Emily until she stood in the doorway and yelled at us. If I recall correctly, the conversation went something like this: "What the hell, Sophia? What do you want?" Sophia and I looked at each other questioningly, and Emily looked at us as if we were crazy. "Seriously? You drag me all the way here and don't even want something?" "Emily, we didn't call you." Sophia did. I was in my room with my laptop and she told me to come to the fort with her. "No, I didn't do that. I was here the whole time making cookies with Buddy." "Oh, whatever, Sophia. You totally did. I heard you. And then when I came in, you'd left them and came here." At this point, I saw that one sister was angry and the other confused, so I stepped in and got the whole story from Emily. Apparently, she had been in her room when she heard Sophia calling her name from the cardboard fort. She asked what she wanted, and Sophia insisted that she come into the fort. So exhausted, she finally did. She couldn't see Sophia in there and heard a moment later her laughing with me in the kitchen. Wherever she was. Of course, the atmosphere in the room immediately changed from warm and cozy to super creepy, and I felt the need to act as the big sister to allay their fears. We went through a while of the "you're lying" phase, but once both parties were satisfied that the other was telling the truth, it was time to investigate. With a kitchen knife in hand, more out of courage than genuine fear for my life, I volunteered to check the cardboard fort while they waited outside and kept an eye on me. I'm a logical, reasonable person. I approach the supernatural and paranormal with what I think is a healthy dose of skepticism. I'm open to the possibility of anything. Ghosts, vampires, mermaids, whatever. But I don't believe it until I have solid scientific evidence of their existence. At that time, I had no such evidence, which is why I had little hesitation to inspect the fort after that incident. If it was an intruder, well, what could they do to me in a cramped little cardboard fort with my sisters right there? Besides, someone had to do it. With these thoughts, I entered the fort and found nothing. No ghosts, no spirits, no homeless people, and no one else in the mansion. Somehow, I managed to convince Emily that she had mistaken the loud television downstairs for our voices, and we all sat down to eat cookies and watch movies together, feeling satisfactorily reassured. Maybe it was a residual effect of the day's incident, but that night both Sophia and Emily had trouble sleeping. In fact, I woke up in the middle of the night when Sophia's frightened voice called, "Buddy, buddy." I'm sure parents with small children probably get used to it, but when I heard that, I was immediately scared. I jumped out of bed, grabbed my knife, and ran into her room. For those wondering why I keep a knife in my bedside drawer, consider that I'm a pretty petite woman who stands little chance defending herself against an intruder without a weapon. Anyway, Sophia's room was dark, and when I flipped the light switch, she was sitting upright in bed with her eyes wide open as if she was about to cry. I saw nothing unusual, so I demanded to know what was wrong. At that moment, Emily came into the room with Buddy in her arms. Sophia told me that she had been sleeping when she suddenly got the feeling someone was in the room watching her. She found herself at the entrance of the cardboard fort. That sent a shiver down my spine because I had had a similar experience, but what she said next was even stranger. She kept her eyes fixed on the entrance and forced herself not to be afraid anymore, when suddenly the boxes started shaking as if something was moving through them, away from her room. Apparently, she then started calling my name and also woke Emily. For the second time that day, I conducted a full search of the cardboard fort and the entire mansion and found nothing. I would have attributed it to a dream if it hadn't been for another strange incident the next day. Sophia was an hour late to work because her alarm didn't go off. Her alarm didn't go off because her phone had disappeared. She claimed she'd left it next to her pillow before going to sleep. Emily and I tried to help her find it before she left. We checked her bed, the floor, and even called it from the landline phone. But neither of us was surprised nor overly worried because she was notorious for misplacing things. When Sophia got home that evening, I asked if it had been there when she woke us in the middle of the night, and she couldn't remember seeing it. But she had been texting her friend in bed and had made sure she set her alarm and placed it next to her. Ultimately, we decided that we couldn't do anything except wait for it to show up again. Around 3 a.m, I was once again awakened by some commotion outside my room. Again, I grabbed my knife and was alert, but above all, I felt anger and frustration. I had had enough of all this drama and wanted to put an end to it. Buddy was in my parents' laundry room barking loudly at the cardboard fort, and Sophia and Emily were already awake, wondering what was going on. Emily picked up the dog and carried him out of the room, and he immediately fell silent, while Sophia and I stood in a closet with confused looks. It was quiet for a moment, and then suddenly Bon Jovi's "Livin' on a Prayer" began playing loud and clear, which scared us. "What the hell?" I said, still trying to get my half-asleep head to comprehend it. Normally, my sisters make fun of me for swearing. Apparently, I don't do it right, but this time it seemed appropriate. "That's my ringtone," said Sophia, looking at me strangely, but she didn't even attempt to grab her phone. "Well, then answer it," I said, frustrated. Sophia lifted the blanket covering the entrance to the cardboard fort, and there lay her missing phone in the middle of the first box, still playing the song from a subpar speaker. She picked it up and put it to her ear. "Hello?" I waited a moment and then asked, "Who is there?" Sophia made a gross noise and hung up the phone. Nothing. It was just our voices echoing in the background. They must have hung up. She folded her arms. "Did you do that? Why the hell would I steal your phone and wake us all up at 3 a.m? I asked incredulously, and Sophia then turned to Emily. "I didn't touch your phone." Emily said, with a look of fear on her face. "Are you kidding? This isn't funny," Sophia exclaimed. "You're scaring me." At this point, I realized that the situation was escalating from weird to sleeplessly creepy, so I sighed and said I would check the entire mansion yet again. I suggested that Buddy might have used the phone as a chew toy and left it in the fort. It was the only explanation I could think of at the time, and although it reassured my sisters, it really wasn't very plausible. Buddy had lost most of his teeth, and the only things I ever saw him play with were soft plush toys, slippers, and dirty underwear. I know, gross. I doubted he would ever want to pick up a phone in his mouth. There was nothing unusual in the mansion, and this time I checked all doors and windows twice. Everything was locked. We were safe. This was just one of those weeks where many small incidents led to a big headache. Before I went to bed, I asked Sophia if her phone had displayed the caller ID for that call. No, it just said unknown. I don't understand why we didn't hear it. It was so loud. I don't know, I shrugged, and changed your ringtone. It was too late to figure things out. The next day, everything seemed fine. The three of us spent time in the mansion's garden and afterwards felt pretty good, laughing and joking about how we'd gotten scared at the slightest anomaly. Sophia was going to a party that night, so it was just Emily and me at home. I felt that Emily still felt weird about the cardboard fort, so I decided to do my best to cheer her up. I didn't want another midnight wake-up call. I grabbed a stack of old magazines, a few scissors, and some glue, and suggested making a collage on one of the interior walls. We had cheerful music playing and discussed an upcoming family trip when Emily suddenly leaned forward and turned the music down as if she wanted to hear something. "What? Did you leave Buddy outside?" she asked, confused. "No, he's probably downstairs. Why?" "I didn't let him out either, but I can hear him barking." "Maybe someone did before they left," I said cheerfully. "Let's go check." For your information, I couldn't hear anything, but Emily was always more alert to Buddy than I was. When we checked the backyard, we couldn't find him, and we didn't hear any barking. I noticed that Emily was getting a bit scared. She loves that dog, while I was starting to get frustrated. Buddy doesn't come when we call him, so we had to search the mansion again. We checked all his favorite hiding spots, but there was no sign of him until we went upstairs and crawled over the cardboard fort to check closets and bedrooms. Suddenly, Emily straightened up and whispered, "Psst." "I hear him again," she said, pausing so I could listen. "I hear nothing," I said after a few moments. "You don't hear his barking? It sounds like he's far away." "Are you sure it's not another dog? We didn't let him out." "No, it's definitely him," she insisted, and went into my parents' laundry room to listen at the window. "Come here, it's louder inside. He must be outside." When I said I still couldn't hear anything, she rolled her eyes and answered, "Then you're deaf," and went down to her shoes. We searched for Buddy all night for 4 hours on foot and by car, calling out for him, and later asking neighbors for help. My heart was in my throat the whole time. I thought we might find something terrible by the roadside, and I wondered how I would comfort two girls who loved Buddy like a baby and had never experienced anything bad. There was also an eerie feeling in the back of my mind because of the distant barking of the dog, but I pushed it aside for now. The next day passed in anxious effort. We made posters, hung them up, and distributed them around the mansion and the surrounding neighborhood. My poor sisters were close to tears, and I wondered why this had to happen when our parents were away. At the end of the evening, they sat down half-heartedly to watch a movie while waiting for a call, and I quietly went upstairs to call my mother and ask her to come home early. I didn't know what would happen to our dog, but I knew I had to do something to comfort my sisters. When I finally went to bed, the mansion was quiet. My sisters had locked up, turned off the lights and gone to sleep, and I was alone with my book. I couldn't sleep, and like the previous nights, I couldn't take my eyes off the entrance of the cardboard fort. I had covered it with a blanket as planned, and although that helped somewhat, I still felt weird about it. Eventually, I cursed inwardly, "This is stupid, I'm going to sleep," and prepared to turn to the other side when a movement caught my peripheral vision. The blanket over the entrance had shifted a little, as if a breeze had blown through. That was strange, since all the windows had been closed the day before when we turned on the air conditioning. I watched closely, trying in the dim light to determine if the blanket was actually moving in and out as if someone was breathing under it, or if it was just my imagination. My eyes weren't playing tricks on me. As I watched, something touched the blanket from inside with a single slender finger and drew a vertical line down to the floor. I'm not a particularly brave person, but when you're responsible for protecting others, something happens. Suddenly, creepy things no longer paralyze you with fear because you know you must be brave for the people you love. I did the only thing my brain allowed in that moment after talking to itself and coming to the most logical explanation. I turned on the light, quietly crept out of bed, and gently called, "Buddy?" When my call received no response, I took the next step forward, and suddenly the boxes trembled as if something was moving through them. I admit I flinched and my heart began pounding like crazy, but I also remembered that amidst all the commotion, we actually hadn't looked inside the cardboard fort. I picked up the flashlight that lay on the floor near the entrance, knelt down, and lifted the blanket to shine inside. There was nothing in the small tunnel that led from my bedroom, but I couldn't see around the corners. "Buddy," I called softly, trying to keep my voice low so I wouldn't wake my sisters. Then again, "Buddy," but in a firmer, come-here-now tone. Finally, I heard a faint whine, the kind he used to make as a puppy, and the scraping noise moved further away from me. I muttered a quiet curse. Apart from all the creepy damn cardboard forts in the middle of the night, thoughts running through my head, I only thought of my little dog, who might be injured and scared, and how I wanted to reach him before my sisters did, to see what had happened. With my sisters, the situation could quickly become hysterical if Buddy were in bad shape. So, summoning courage beyond fear, I went on all fours with the flashlight inside. It was eerily quiet in there, that kind of absolute silence that makes you feel like your ears are stuffed with cotton, where you can hear your own breathing so clearly. When I reached the end of the tunnel, I first looked to the right, toward my sister's rooms, but there was nothing there. When I looked to the left, I heard a scraping, and my flashlight beam caught the end of something black bending around the corner. "Buddy. Buddy," I hissed. "Buddy, come here, boy." I tried to make my voice sweeter and more inviting, but that dog never comes when he's scared. I sighed and pressed on, crawling past our abandoned attempt at a collage. When I reached the end, I shone the flashlight down the long tunnel that led to the closet. The weak beam wasn't strong enough to see to the end. It simply stopped at a wall of darkness. My determination wavered. I must have crawled on hands and knees for a whole minute before that whining sound came to me again and something scraped further down the tunnel. It urged me to go further. Determined, I moved toward the closet, each moment expecting my weak flashlight beam to illuminate the red fleece blanket with penguins we had used to cover the closet entrance to the fort. But I found nothing. Not even an opening. The best way I can describe it is by comparing it to that game we played as kids, where you close your eyes, lie on your back on the floor, and stretch your arms and legs up. Two friends hold your hands and feet and lower them as slowly as possible to the ground. It initially feels normal, but eventually your brain expects your body to touch the floor, and when it doesn't, as you continue going downward, you feel like you're going through the floor. That's how it was as I was in the tunnel. I crawled further, shining my small flashlight ahead, growing more uneasy as I didn't reach the end or see any sign of it. And there was something else that annoyed me. Something about the way the boxes trembled as if something big was crawling through them, like me. I don't know how far I went or how long I was there, but at some point I just stopped, with the distinct feeling that this isn't right. I visualized the fort in my head. By my reckoning, I should have been somewhere in the backyard by now, 2 stories up. It finally became clear that I was in a space that couldn't possibly exist, and something was chasing me that was obviously bigger than Buddy. I panicked and ran as fast as I could away, as the passage behind me led nowhere but to a black, endless tunnel. I truly lost control. I began tearing the boxes apart at the seams, making a path, and finally found myself in a tangled heap of blankets and cardboard in the middle of my parents' laundry room. It must have looked silly, a mess of me sprawled on the floor, but as I looked up at the cramped walls of that 5 by 10 foot built-in closet, goosebumps ran down my arms. It was like stepping outside after a jog, and then realizing 10 minutes later you hadn't even left the first few steps. It just didn't make any sense that I had crawled so far in that tunnel and gotten nowhere, while something was following me still inside. To this day, I can't explain it, and I don't like to think about it. Even worse, I don't like to remember how that persistent whimpering followed me all the way back. Trembling with lingering terror, I immediately began dismantling the cardboard fort. As my sisters emerged from their rooms, sleepy and confused, I mumbled something about having to tear it down before Mom got home and continued with my work. I left only 1 box standing. I thought, if I was going crazy, I might as well fully embrace it. With thoughts of our dog in mind, I left a single box alone in the closet and carried all the others to the bonfire pit in the mansion's garden. The next morning, I burned them, and my mom was back by the afternoon. It's not quite the end of the story, because later a bit of luck awaited us, but I almost wished it were the end. It wasn't a proper closure for me. What happened next? We found Buddy a few days later. He was okay. A bit erratic and nervous for a while, but happy to see us. My family was overjoyed. Nothing could really dampen their mood, not even something small like where I had found him. It seemed like for everyone except me, all thoughts of the cardboard fort had been completely wiped away. The day he came home, I was alone in the mansion, washing dishes from a pancake breakfast and letting my thoughts drift. Suddenly, I noticed a faint scratching and whining somewhere nearby. My heart leaped. I checked the back door, the garage, and the front door, all to no avail, before I realized the noise was coming from upstairs. Slowly, I made my way upstairs, following the sound to my parents' room, and finally to the closed closet door. I opened the door, and my little dog jumped on me, bouncing and barking for attention. I put away the last box afterward, but perhaps it was too late. That night, Mom came into my room carrying a bundle of socks and underwear, asking me which of my things were mine. She sometimes did our laundry and couldn't tell what belonged to whom. I sorted out my things, and when she left, she turned around with a grin, laughed, and shook her head. "Whose Halloween costume is hanging in my closet? It scared me half to death." I put my book down. "Which costume?" "You know, the big black one with the long arms and white eyes. It looks so lifelike." "Is it from a movie or something?" I stared at her blankly for a moment. "Oh, yeah, that's mine. I'll bring it downstairs." I waited until I heard my mother's footsteps coming down the stairs, then silently made my way to her room. My fear had a nearly hypnotic effect on me, driving me to the closet. All I knew was that I had to see it. The closet door was open, but the light was off. I held my breath, turned on the light, and looked around. Clothes, boxes, belts, ties, suitcases, blankets. Everything hung or stood neatly on the shelves. Then, at the back, there was an empty space about 6 inches wide where the clothes had been pushed aside. A single plastic hanger swayed back and forth and quickly lost momentum. The window next to me was open, and that's how I discovered that some mysteries might never be fully explained. I am a personal chef, working exclusively for private clients. My primary clients are those who hire me for private banquets, but there are also customers for whom I prepare meals for a week or longer, depending on their wishes. When I moved from Germany to the United States, I immersed myself deeply in the world of American cuisine. To learn the basics, I enrolled in the renowned Culinary Institute of America in New York. Afterwards, I worked in several restaurants and hotels in New York and Chicago, gradually climbing the ranks. After nearly a year as a junior chef in a well-known restaurant in Boston, and just about to reach the position of sous chef, I quit. Don't get me wrong, my passion for food and cooking is undeniable. It was just the constant stress that became overwhelming. I was tired of the toxic environment and the constant criticism from the head chef. So, despite being one of the top graduates of my class with a promising future as a top chef, I decided to pursue self-employment instead of the fiercely competitive restaurant scene. And so I found myself in New York City as a personal chef. What I like most about my current job is that I mostly work from home, except for banquets, and that it is very well paid. Most of the time I have regular clients, but occasionally I gain new ones. I should mention that in addition to my cooking skills, my clients demand the utmost discretion. Of course, as a precaution, I always inquire about the nature of the event and its location before accepting an assignment. During my 5 years as a personal chef in the United States, I have prepared meals for a variety of events: costume balls, bachelor parties, birthday celebrations, but also for secret meetings, BDSM private soirees, and even special LSD parties. For this reason, many of my clients ask me to sign a non-disclosure agreement with very specific conditions. Usually, I don't mind. Who am I to judge people and their lives? Of course, I strive to become one of the most sought-after personal chefs in New York, and I constantly keep an eye out for prestigious clients who can help me achieve my goal. That's how I met my latest client, Mr. Stone. Mr. Stone is a descendant of an old American family. He hired me to prepare a banquet for a 3-day hunting society gathering. The banquet was to take place at a mansion in the countryside of Virginia, which was unusual for me. To be honest, I was thrilled by this opportunity. It would give my career as a personal chef a fantastic boost and introduce me into the inner circle of old American aristocracy. The possibilities for a lucrative career were endless. I could not have wished for a better chance, so I was determined to do my best. My client and I agreed on the menu and made sure that all ingredients were delivered to the mansion on time. He assured me that his kitchen staff would support me during the preparations, for which I was grateful. Usually, I rarely spend the night at a client's residence, but on this occasion, I made an exception. Mr. Stone suggested that I stay at the mansion, as it would be more convenient than commuting to a hotel for 3 days. Up to that point, everything seemed fine, and I was ready to travel from New York City to the southern United States in the last week of September. On the day of my departure, Mr. Stone called me and said that he was in New York for business and offered to drive me to the mansion. I hesitated, as it would disrupt my plans and I hate unexpected events. At the same time, the drive from New York City to the town where the mansion was located would take at least 7 exhausting hours. He told me it would be difficult to find the road to the mansion in that remote area anyway, and assured me that his SUV had enough room for all the supplies and tools I wanted to bring. It was too embarrassing to refuse the offer, so I agreed. I told myself that at least I wouldn't arrive exhausted. Around noon, Mr. Stone and his chauffeur picked me up from my apartment, and we drove to the Stone estate, where the hunt and the banquet were supposed to take place. Up until this drive, I had only spoken to Mr. Stone on the phone. So, during the ride, I could observe him closely. He was probably in his late 40s, with graying hair and a clean-shaven face. From his posture and calloused hands, I could tell he was athletic, perhaps practiced martial arts or boxing. With his sun-tanned skin and striking green eyes, he was undeniably attractive. But his most striking feature was his piercing, almost predatory gaze, which made even the most confident person feel uneasy. Being so close to him in the back seat made me uncomfortable. I was truly fascinated by him. It was obvious there were interesting stories behind him. Mr. Stone handed me my contract and the non-disclosure agreement to sign as soon as the chauffeur left. Then he informed me that his accountant would make a down payment that day. He made a quick call, then turned to me with a rather strange smile. "So, Allie isn't your real name?" he said as I handed him the signed NDA. "I've never heard the name Equetzali. Is that a Spanish name?" "It's a Nahuatl name. It's from an ancient ethnic group in the Amazon region that lives in Mexico and nearby areas. It's hard to pronounce, so I go by Allie." "What exactly does it mean?" Mr. Stone insisted. "Feather, or maybe something valuable, I'm not sure," I replied absent-mindedly. "You don't look Mexican at all. I mean, your features are unique." He had a point. Unlike my mother and half-sisters who have dark hair and eyes, I have hazel eyes and light brown, almost honey-colored hair. "That's right. Were you born in Mexico or the USA?" "I was born in the United States and grew up there," I said, offering no further details. I don't like talking about my childhood and family. I think Mr. Stone understood and just nodded. "Have you always wanted to work in gastronomy?" No, it was more of a change in direction in my late 20s. He gave me a curious look. "I worked in another field when I lived in Germany, but then when I came to America, I decided to become a chef." "Oh, I see." That seemed to surprise him, but he asked no more. After a while, he added with a disconcerting grin, "Do you train regularly, Allie?" This personal question caught me off guard. Just call me Allie. And yes, I train whenever I have time. Please excuse my personal question, Allie." He apologized with a smile. "I just appreciate those who work in gastronomy and take care of their health. And I see you're in very good shape." I returned his smile. If only he knew how many trophies I'd won in track and field back in school. My coach once told me I had the heart of a wolf and the endurance of a hunter, the perfect combination for a marathon. That memory felt like ages ago. "Thank you." I didn't want to discuss it further, so I changed the subject. "Do you go hunting every year, Mr. Stone?" Mr. Stone didn't answer immediately. He paused for a moment and then said distractedly, "No, not every year, but I hope for a successful hunt, as we will have international guests this year." Then, to my relief, he took a folder from his briefcase and said he had some work to do, and that was the end of our conversation. I took out my tablet to do some work myself. I checked my emails before adding a few details to the menu for the upcoming banquet. I looked at my smartwatch, 6 hours left. I thought I could use that time to work on my cookbook project. So I reviewed my notes and revised them a bit. The rest of the drive was pleasant. I checked the map I had downloaded the day before. So far, we were following the route I had planned. We made 2 short stops, and at the second one, Mr. Stone offered me coffee. When we got back on the road, I tried to read a bit but felt exhausted and sleepy. Eventually, I gave up and dozed off for the rest of the journey. It was almost 7 p.m. when I suddenly woke up, a bit disoriented. We were driving through a very dense forest. "We're at my family's estate," Mr. Stone explained when he noticed I was looking around dazedly. "This is one of the oldest forests in America, and my family has protected it diligently over the centuries, especially during the Civil War when armies needed wood. It's easy to lose your way here," I remarked, looking out the window. "You have no idea," Mr. Stone exclaimed, a strange smile on his face. We drove another half hour through the forest before reaching the gates of the mansion. There were several cameras and an access control system. The gate was made of wrought iron, adorned with ivy and wild animal motifs, and bore the Stone family crest. A man with a bow and arrow pointing at something that looked like a two-legged running animal. "What?" I blinked to confirm, but the gate had already opened and the SUV was driving through, so I couldn't be sure. How strange. We traveled along a 2-mile-long avenue lined with chestnut trees on both sides. The sun was setting, and a beautiful light filtered through the trees. In the distance, an imposing mansion with striking blue brick rose up, reminiscent of the castles you see in movies set on a pristine lawn. I was impressed. Stone Mansion seemed almost like a testament to my client's family's strength over time. As we approached, I noticed 2 towers at the center of the front, decorated with blue bricks and some gargoyles. "Do you have children?" I suddenly blurted out as Mr. Stone spoke. He must have noticed my frown and gave me one of his unsettling grins. "I just thought it would be nice if you brought your little family along to enjoy this place while you work." "No, I don't have children. I'm not married." "Ah, that's a shame." Mr. Stone nodded, his curious smile not quite reaching his piercing green eyes. As the car stopped, he added, "Thank you, Allie, for coming to Stone Mansion. I believe you'll find your time here fascinating." "I'm sure I will, Mr. Stone." For some reason, I didn't like that seemingly innocent question he asked. Why did I have such a strange feeling? I heard dogs barking as we arrived at the mansion. They must be the hunting dogs used on the estate. A large man waited at the foot of the steps. He opened the car door and exchanged a few words with Mr. Stone before turning to me and nodding. "Simon will take you to your room and show you the kitchen later," Mr. Stone said as he entered the front door. I waited for Simon, a gruff old man, to take my luggage from the car. Then I followed him through the main entrance of the mansion, where Mr. Stone had just gone inside. The entrance hall was enormous, with a grand chandelier hanging from the ceiling. The oak floors on the upper landing at the far end were adorned with exquisite wood carvings. The high ceilings of the foyer, decorated in a traditional mansion style, were adorned with paintings of dancing figures and various plants and flowers. Simon and I walked down a corridor on the left side of the mansion. The place was filled with breathtaking artworks and antique furniture, some likely centuries old. Yet, despite the high artistic value and the excellent condition of the artifacts, there was something unsettling about this place, as if a terrible dark past loomed over them. I didn't like it. Not at all. We took a very narrow, winding staircase up to the second floor. These were most likely the staff quarters. My room was literally at the end of the hall. It was a simple, practical space with a built-in bed. Floral wallpaper in yellow and green motifs gave the room a cheerful atmosphere. A large window was centered on one wall, and a dressing table stood to the right. I couldn't spot any wardrobes until Simon opened a small closet on the opposite wall. I checked my phone for messages and emails while Simon unloaded my luggage and opened the windows. There was no reception in this room. Simon, I need to check my emails, but I don't have any service here. "Is there anywhere I can get a signal?" I asked. "We only have a landline phone, Miss Allie. Do you have any device with internet capabilities?" "We don't have internet access in the mansion, miss. If you'd like to make a call, I can show you the phone in the office." "Number? It's okay. Who still lives without internet these days?" "There's only one bathroom on this floor," Simon added. "Fortunately, you won't have to share it with anyone since you're the only guest here." I nodded. "Would you like to rest for a moment before seeing the kitchen and having dinner?" It was almost 8 p.m., and I was quite hungry. "It's better to meet the staff immediately. I'll rest later." We went down the stairs and entered the kitchen on the main floor. It was a brand new kitchen, functional and equipped with the latest technology. The chef, an old, gruff, and rather eerie man, greeted me and led me to a table next to the walk-in cooler where dinner was served. After dinner, I had a brief meeting with the staff, the chef, and 2 middle-aged employees to discuss the agenda for the coming days. I gave Simon a selection of wines that I thought would pair well with the menu. He said he would present them to Mr. Stone later for approval. Up to that point, everything was fine, so I returned to my room. The mansion was very quiet, perhaps because the guests hadn't arrived yet. I took a quick shower and changed into my pajamas. As I lay in bed, I began reflecting on the day's events. I remembered clearly that I didn't like this place the moment I entered Stone Mansion. There was something unsettling about the mansion and the staff. Everyone seemed tense, as if waiting for something to happen. Mr. Stone, his chauffeur, Simon, and the others were all grim and spoke little. Yes, there would be a hunt, guests, and a banquet, but something felt off. As usual, I overthought everything and stressed unnecessarily. I had a job to do, and that was it. I was really tired, so after just a few minutes I promptly fell asleep. I was running through the dark woods, the barking behind me growing louder and louder. I knew something terrible was chasing me, but I was too afraid to look back. "You are not alone. We are with you." The faint voice of my mother whispered in my ear, "Go away, Mom. Leave me alone." The trees were so close together that I kept stumbling over branches and bushes. I was utterly exhausted and could barely breathe, but I ran as fast as I could. I tripped over something on the ground and fell flat on my face. When I looked at what I'd fallen on, I realized it was a body. My body. I froze in terror. "Aquetzali, wake up! Wake up!" My mother's scream jolted me awake. When I opened my eyes, my heart was pounding wildly. Everything was dark. It took a moment to calm down and remember that I was in Stone Mansion. It had all been a dream. I glanced at my smartwatch. It was 3:30 a.m. My mother's scream still echoed in my ears. The dream was so vivid and left me feeling very drained. "You're not alone," she had said. My mother only called me Aquetzali when she had something very important to tell me. What did that mean? I got out of bed to drink some water and shake off the nightmare. It upset me just thinking about it. I hadn't been in good contact with my mother since my 20s. After I moved to America, I never saw her again. My stepfather had called 2 years ago to tell me she had passed away. I tried not to think about it, but the dream unsettled me. Suddenly, a flash of light appeared on my ceiling, followed by the sound of brakes on gravel. The hunting dogs were barking somewhere outside, signaling that the guests had arrived. Mr. Stone informed me that the banquet would be attended by 12 people. I heard voices outside chatting for a while, then silence. I tried to go back to sleep, but couldn't. All I could think about was the dream and the unease that had overcome me. I could hardly wait for this banquet to be over. I must have dozed off around dawn. My alarm rang at 7 a.m. I changed into my workout clothes and went outside. The night before, I had asked Simon if I could go jogging nearby, and he said it was fine as long as I didn't venture too deep into the woods. I stepped out the kitchen door, where the chef was already preparing breakfast for the staff. Outside, I found myself on a beautiful terrace overlooking the backside of the mansion. Rose bushes clung to the mansion's walls, adding a romantic and pleasant touch. This garden must require a lot of care to stay so beautiful. While the main entrance of the mansion was dominant and formal, this side felt intimate and almost inviting. I walked around the mansion, past a separate building that must be the garage, and then began to run along the edge of the forest surrounding the estate. After 45 minutes, not far from the separate building, I stopped to stretch. As I considered doing another lap in the woods, I heard muffled footsteps behind me. When I turned, 2 huge black dogs were creeping toward me. "Don't move! Don't look into their eyes!" Mr. Stone shouted from somewhere near the garage. I froze as the dogs began sniffing and growling at me. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Mr. Stone approaching casually. What the hell? He deliberately took his time, clearly aware of how stressful the situation was. He whistled shortly, and the dogs vanished in an instant. I couldn't help but shoot him a reproachful look. "I'm afraid you've just met my trusted guard dogs," Mr. Stone said with a sly grin, as if we were having a casual conversation. I realized I had been holding my breath. I took a deep breath and gave him the coldest look I could muster. "Can I run safely now?" He grinned, petting one of the dogs. "Yes, you can. As long as you stay within the mansion grounds. My dogs don't like strangers around." I seethed inwardly. Was that a warning? "Good to know, Mr. Stone. I think I should head back to the mansion. Excuse me." I walked back without giving him another glance. What an idiot. Once inside, I went straight to my room, took a shower, and tried to calm down. I forced myself to push the incident out of my mind. It was time to get back to work. I put on my apron and fastened my smartwatch to my ankle, just as I always did to protect it from heat, before heading back to the kitchen. I was informed that the guests would have breakfast very late, which meant I'd have plenty of time to plan for lunch and dinner. At 11 a.m., Simon entered the kitchen and told me that Mr. Stone wanted to see me in his study. What was that about again? I hate being interrupted while cooking, especially when there's a lot to do. Clutching my apron, I reluctantly followed Simon. We took the same route as before, but then turned toward the left side of the mansion. We walked down a long corridor with large windows overlooking the backyard. Simon stopped at the very last door and knocked gently. I could hear Mr. Stone on the phone. Simon nudged the door open for me. As I entered, he closed the door and left. The study looked like a small museum, with hundreds of artworks adorning the walls. It smelled of cigarettes and a strong chemical scent. Mr. Stone sat at his desk, cleaning some sort of crossbow while speaking on the phone. He motioned for me to take a seat. I moved to the nearest armchair, but my gaze was immediately drawn to the tapestries on the walls. One depicted a diverse group of nobles relaxing in an outdoor garden, attended by servants with noticeably tanned skin. On the opposite wall, another tapestry showed a gathering of nobles, men and women, also served by people of color. The scene took place in a wooden room decorated with hunting trophies. Fascinating. When I reached the armchair, I hesitated. Behind it stood a stained glass display cabinet containing various old medical tools and surgical instruments. Some were likely centuries old. I recognized surgical scissors, different forceps, numerous scalpel blades, abdominal forceps, bone hooks, bone levers, sharp hooks, and suction cups. Some tools were made of copper, others of gold or bronze. As I approached the cabinet, I noticed they were in pristine condition, as though frequently used. "Ah, you've noticed my favorite collection." I nearly jumped when I saw Mr. Stone standing 2 feet behind me. He grinned and opened the cabinet so I could get a better look. "These are very rare items," I remarked. "Are they an inheritance from doctors in your family?" "Not as far as I know," he grinned. "You don't have to be a doctor to own such valuable tools. They must be worth millions, especially these 2 bronze forceps from the 11th century. They were considered revolutionary at the time and had a significant impact on modern surgery." "You seem very knowledgeable about medical matters," Mr. Stone observed. "I used to be a surgeon before I moved to America." "Oh, really?" Mr. Stone looked clearly amazed. "We might have a lot in common, Allie." He quickly turned back to the cabinet and closed it carefully, then walked to a small table on the opposite side of the study. "Coffee?" he asked, turning on an espresso machine. "Yes, please." The aroma of coffee filled the room. He handed me a cup and took one for himself. "Thank you." As I sipped the coffee, I noticed another tapestry depicting a forest scene with some very curious animals. "I see you are an art lover as well," he remarked. "Is he making small talk now?" "I'm sure everyone is," I replied. He looked up at the tapestry. In the old days, artists never left their villages. They had only heard of exotic animals and plants from people who traveled abroad. They had never seen a jaguar, a lion, or an ostrich. They could only imagine them and create such beautiful artworks. Mr. Stone fell silent for a moment, but I sensed him watching me out of the corner of his eye. "Apologies for the scare this morning," he finally said. "It's all right," I lied. Cane Corsos are extremely protective dogs. They just don't like strangers around. I took another sip of coffee. "I understand. I'll be leaving in a few days anyway. Actually, I wanted to show you the mansion's cellar." He set his coffee cup down and walked around his desk. "I believe you gave Simon a list of wine recommendations, right?" "I did, but you don't have to show me the cellar, Mr. Stone. Any available wine is fine." Mr. Stone smiled and tilted his head slightly. "I insist, Miss Allie, or shall I say Dr. Allie?" He gave me an unreadable look, a strange mix of admiration, sarcasm, and something else. Then he opened a drawer, took out a set of old skeleton keys, and walked to the door. He turned it and said, "After you, Miss Allie." Once again, I couldn't say no, so I followed him. The cellars were located beneath the right tower of the mansion, while beneath the other tower was the kitchen. We walked silently down the stairs. Mr. Stone opened a pair of old, heavy wooden doors and then switched on the light. A dozen large wooden barrels lined both sides of the cellar. Goosebumps ran down my spine as we entered. It was very cold down here, and the silence was eerie. We could hear our footsteps echoing. We walked to the end of the cellar where a huge wine display covered the entire wall. "Actually, we are in the old kitchen," Mr. Stone explained. "It was built in the 13th century. It's the deepest and strongest part of the mansion. In the last century, we converted it into the cellar." Why was he bringing me here? Behind the barrels were low but sturdy vaults along stone walls. I discovered an old chimney that must have been at least 5 meters high. There was also an old well. It was covered, but I could make out its antique wooden pulley system. I got chills. This whole place was raw and rugged, with a strong sense of secrecy. Instead of going to the wine display, Mr. Stone walked around a table in the middle of the room and then to the opposite wall. A tablecloth was draped over a large object. "I want to show you my favorite piece in the entire mansion," Mr. Stone said excitedly as he unveiled a large wooden cutting board. "What the hell?" When we measured this board, it couldn't fit through the windows or doors of the old kitchen. So it must have been here before that part of the mansion was completed. We believe it's the oldest piece in the entire mansion. Then he looked at me and grinned. It seems petrified, but it's not. It's just the blood, fat, and grime of centuries of service, he added, lightly running his hand over the cutting board without taking his eyes off me. A terrible shiver ran down my spine. In an instant, his demeanor changed completely. He began to intimidate me. Slowly, he moved toward me, his gaze fixed on mine. He gently caressed my right cheek with his fingers in a swift, confident gesture. My heart pounded against my chest. He came so close that I could see the dark flecks in his green eyes. A cold, deep fear spread across my skin. The smell of coffee and cigarettes filled my nostrils, and I could feel his breath on my lips. Then he stepped back, a sad smile on his face. "What a pity," he sighed. "What?" It took great effort to collect my thoughts and speak softly. "I should go back to the kitchen." I stepped aside and made my way to the cellar doors. It took all my strength not to run up the stairs and flee down the hallway. Back in the kitchen, I tried to stay calm so the others wouldn't notice my trembling hands. All the excitement and enthusiasm I'd felt before this banquet were gone, replaced by an overwhelming sense of fear. Busy with cooking, I pushed away the frightening thoughts that had crept into my mind since that strange interaction in the cellar with Mr. Stone. But as soon as lunch was served and we took a break from preparing dinner, those anxious thoughts returned. What if Mr. Stone was some kind of pervert who wanted to harm me? I was sure I was strong enough to defend myself, but just the thought caused my muscles to cramp. If I had come by car, I would have found any excuse and driven away. I felt trapped. In hindsight, no one knew that I was at Stone Mansion. I had received the contract on the way here, and the down payment was supposed to have hit my bank account yesterday, but there was no way to check my account without the internet. Now, I didn't even have a signal to check my bank or call anyone. I was trapped. A sickening feeling of fear overcame me. How had I ended up in this situation? At 9 p.m., we heard a helicopter landing in the mansion's backyard, perhaps a late guest. After a few moments, Simon came into the kitchen to tell me that the guests were very pleased with the lunch menu. Although the compliment should have made me proud, inexplicably, it had the opposite effect. All I wanted was to finish this banquet and go home. "They want to meet you and congratulate you in person. Mr. Stone sent me to invite you to the Grand Salon," Simon said. "I'm afraid I can't, Simon. We're in the middle of preparations and I have a few things in the oven," I replied. "Mr. Stone insists. It won't take long." I knew how much clients and guests enjoyed talking to the chef during such banquets. It's almost like a ritual. I just couldn't break away. So, after the planned beet brownies for dessert were finished, I went with Simon. The Grand Salon was on the first floor. I could hear women giggling as we walked through the foyer. Simon opened the door for me, and I found myself in one of the most magnificent American salons I had ever seen. The walls were covered in luxurious deep red brocade, adorned with golden motifs from ceiling to floor. Soft lighting created an inviting atmosphere while a strong scent of cigars filled the air. As I entered, all conversations fell silent and everyone turned to look at me. "Ah, there she is." Mr. Stone beamed and cheered. His eyes shone with a strange joy. "Isn't that Miss Allie? We are finally pleased to meet you." A large bearded man with a British accent spoke up. "Thank you, sir. It was my pleasure." I hadn't expected such a warm welcome. Oh my God, the lunch was delicious. That duck with beef roulade, fig jam and goat cheese, exquisite. And the incredible pistachio pesto and walnut puree. "Absolutely divine," said an older woman sitting in an armchair, holding a golden cigarette holder in her aged hands. "I hope you enjoyed the meal, madam." The guests continued to look at me, smiling. I wasn't sure why, but it made me very uneasy. "Let's make a toast," Mr. Stone said to his guests. "Simon, please bring a glass for Miss Allie." Simon went to the cabinet across the room and fetched a glass. Mr. Stone poured champagne and handed it to me. Then he raised his glass for a toast as everyone stood and lifted their glasses. "To the hunt!" Mr. Stone shouted. "To the hunt!" Everyone echoed. I took a sip of champagne. Why were they toasting the hunt instead of Mr. Stone? I wasn't fluent in German, but it felt odd that they celebrated the hunt rather than their host. "I noticed you were very interested in art this morning," Mr. Stone said as he moved closer to the fireplace. "I'd like to show you an interesting tapestry." He pulled a red cord to draw aside a pair of curtains above the fireplace. A magnificent tapestry was revealed, depicting a hunting scene in the woods with a man standing on a reddish hill aiming a crossbow. I had to step back to see the entire tapestry. The hunter, dressed in old-fashioned attire, resembled the figure I'd seen earlier at the mansion gates. My eyes searched for the prey he was pursuing. It was running through the forest on 2 legs. What? I squinted. Surely the prey was walking upright. To my horror, it wasn't an animal. I gasped. It was a naked man with tanned skin like those in the other tapestries. My gaze shifted back to the hunter. When I realized he wasn't standing on a hill at all, but atop human bodies, I shivered. Was this a hallucination? I turned to Mr. Stone, who watched me with an uneasy grin. "The Stone family crest," he said, holding his champagne glass and pointing at the tapestry. "You see, Miss Allie, the Stones didn't become wealthy by selling wood and coal. They are a very old line of hunters who came from the old continent. They organized hunting societies for European nobles and aristocrats around the world for centuries. But during the conquest of America, they truly thrived. Why do you think wealthy Europeans wanted to move to an unknown land? For spices and beautiful landscapes." He laughed. What does all this mean?" I stammered, horrified, shocked, and utterly confused. When I looked back at the guests, I was surprised to see they were all still standing, staring at me with the same uneasy grin. I must get out of here. It was for new prey. Mr. Stone's voice startled me. "Our favorite prey were your ancestors, Aquetzali." What? I began, but the horrifying realization hit me like a bucket of ice-cold water. They were toasting the hunt, the prey, to me. I began to feel numbness in my feet and hands. I stood there watching as the champagne glass slipped from my hand and shattered on the floor. The last thing I saw was Mr. Stone drinking from his glass, grinning as he watched me fall. I woke up dizzy. Slowly, I opened my eyes halfway. Though it was dark, I could see I was lying on the ground. It was cold and smelled of pine. I heard nocturnal insects buzzing. Where was I? A sudden owl call made me open my eyes fully and collapse to my knees. Panicked, I looked around and realized I was in the middle of the forest. It felt as if my mind was shrouded in fog. The last thing I remembered was someone grinning triumphantly as I fell. It was Mr. Stone, the tapestry, the hunter and the bodies he stood upon. My stomach churned with sudden realization. They must have drugged me and left me in the middle of the woods. But why? Part of me was in denial, wanting it all to be just a nightmare. But deep down, I knew the truth. They hadn't said it outright in the Grand Salon, but it was clear this was a human hunt. I hurriedly stood up and checked my clothes. I was still wearing the same outfit from that morning, except I had removed my chef's apron. I rummaged through my pockets looking for my phone. Damn it. I'd forgotten it in the kitchen before going to the Grand Salon. Wait, my smartwatch. I bent down and felt my right ankle. It was still there. They hadn't noticed it. I quickly removed the watch and snapped it back onto my wrist. It was 3 a.m. There was no reception here. Damn. What should I do now? I looked around once more. I was in a clearing lit by the half moon. I held my breath for a few seconds, listening to the surrounding sounds. All I could hear were owl calls and muffled animal noises. What if wolves or bears were nearby? What if I was being watched? Suddenly, breathing became difficult. My heart pounded and my muscles tensed. I started to panic. Terrible scenarios raced through my mind. I needed to focus. Think, Allie, think quickly. My Work Outdoors app. It must have synchronized with my smartphone when I downloaded the map to the mansion. It should work offline too. I searched through my apps and found it. All I saw on the map were miles of forest and a mountain in the distance. But there were no roads or towns nearby. Damn. What should I do now? Should I wait until daybreak or run for my life right now? The forest was dark and eerie. I couldn't see through the trees, and running in the dark was dangerous. I might break my ankle or fall and injure myself. My name is Danica Craven, and I have been an archaeologist for a decade. Tempting opportunities often come my way. Sometimes a rusted relic is discovered in the remains of an old military base, or a solitary fossil washes ashore at a remote location. But I'm frequently outpaced by others. That's just how the game is. And over the years, fewer and fewer ancient treasures remain undiscovered. That's why, last December, I was completely stunned by a tip I received near Fort Hawkstone. This majestic fortress, tucked into the Rocky Mountains, surrounded by dense forests and snow-capped peaks, hides countless secrets. My team and I were the first to arrive, and that was not a chance to be wasted. We examined a frigid recess in the lower chambers of the fort near Pikes Peak, one of the highest summits in Colorado. 2 days before, after a brutal snowstorm, a twisted steel panel had been found half buried in the snow, clinging to a steep rock face. Sam Langston and I suspected its origin. Our suspicions were confirmed when our team excavated something at that spot. "I told you so," I boasted. "I know you did," laughed Sam. "But dial down your expectations, Danny. We still don't know what we found." An hour later came the satisfying clank of metal against metal. Tony Flores, our lead digger, had uncovered a tall, metallic door. After a long day of work, he finally let his shovel fall into the snow. We followed suit, dropping our tools. Although I dug much more slowly than our brawny workers, I still felt a sense of accomplishment. A smile spread across my cheeks. "Incredible," Sam whispered. "You love that word, don't you?" I smiled. "Even if we go inside and see hard evidence, you'll still call me delusional." "Well, here's the issue," Sam said, scratching his neck. "How are we supposed to get in there?" "Not with this flimsy equipment," Tony said. "We need something heavy-duty to break that door open." The man, a bear of a figure with rosy, frozen cheeks, led us out of the snow tunnel. "Explosives?" suggested Andy Becker. "Calm down, kid. A hydraulic system should do," Tony replied. "But we're not opening it tonight. It keeps snowing. Daylight's gone and everyone's cold and exhausted." I snorted. "But not tonight, Miss Craven," Tony insisted. "Sam?" I said, turning to my friend for backup. My colleague just shrugged. "Sorry, Danica. Without Tony and his men, we can't do much." "But this is an undiscovered American fortress," I argued. "In 24 hours, we won't be the only ones here. You know locals will have spread the word by then about the steel panel we found. We're packing up and heading back down to town, Tony said firmly. I'll see you tomorrow morning. An idea struck me. Sam, let's camp here, I suggested. Stand guard at the tunnel. Claim this area. This is our site and I don't want anyone else to take it. I strongly advise against that, Miss Craven, Tony warned, rubbing his red forehead with one big hand. Other than some winter resort tourists, nobody sleeps on this mountain. Wild camping's not safe. Leave us a tent and we'll be fine, I promised. Sam, are you willing to stay with me? My partner nodded. Sure, Danny, this is our find. I don't want to lose it either. Tony grumbled, shoved past us, and started to pack up his gear. We appreciate your help, Tony, I said. You don't have to appreciate it, he snorted. I'm not paid to be appreciated, and I'm sure not paid to babysit. Then Tony Flores and his men began making their way down the mountain toward the warm lights of the nearby town. I'm sorry, Sam, I said, as we nestled into our sleeping bags. He shrugged and smiled. I respect you, Danica. You're more committed to this work than anyone I've ever met. You deserve this find, so let's keep it safe. I'm paranoid, I sighed. No doubt, Sam laughed. But better safe than sorry, right? We'd hate ourselves if somebody raided our freshly uncovered site after we did all the heavy lifting. I smirked. I mean, that was mostly Tony's heavy lifting. Mostly Tony's, Sam agreed, and we both laughed. Thank you, I said. You're always so level-headed. That's one of my gifts, he grinned. As I drifted off, I'd never felt safer. Wrapped in a snug cotton cocoon, listening to the howling gusts and the billowing tent fabric, I was oddly comforted. Our campsite blocked the entrance to the snow tunnel, guarding the gateway to what I believed might be a final, hidden Cold War-era bunker. It was the crown jewel of my career, my life. That cozy feeling of fulfillment didn't last. Sam and I woke in the early hours to a hoarse roar. What was that? My friend gasped, sitting upright. I don't know, I answered, breathless, rubbing my eyes. It sounded... I was cut off by the crunch of snow under enormous weight. It's got to be an animal, Sam whispered. What kind of animal gets caught in a snowstorm like this? I asked. And it wasn't a human. Neither of us questioned that. The footsteps were too thunderous. Though our instincts told us to stay inside, our curiosity overruled all caution. My mother always told me my inquisitiveness would be the death of me. Sam cleared his throat. You know. Yes, I answered, before he could even finish. My colleague grinned, just as eager to explore, and he carefully unzipped the tent. We peered out, squinting through the relentless flurry. Near the edge of our campsite, lit by the tall floodlight Tony had left behind, deep prints etched the snow. Something had prowled around the perimeter of our camp, and for one chilling moment I saw a black silhouette vanish out of sight, some huge shape masked by the torrent of white flakes. Did you see that? I called. No, Sam answered, frowning. What was it? I don't know, I said. But it didn't look like an animal. Well, no person made these tracks, he said, nodding toward the giant footprints. Must be I don't know, what time is it? I checked my watch. Almost 4 a.m. Tony and the crew should be back in a few hours. Sam nodded. Let's try and get some more sleep. Stay calm. If some creature wanted to attack us, it would have done so already. I guess so. But something's on my mind, I said. What? Sam asked. I paused, nodding toward the steel artifact near my sleeping bag. This panel is dented and crushed. Why? They've had nasty storms up here, Sam said. Bad weather's common in the Rockies. This fortress is buried beneath a sea of snow. It's built into the mountain. A storm didn't just knock this panel loose, Sam, I insisted. We might not be the first to find the bunker. You need to quit worrying about that, Sam teased. No one beat us to it. This is our site. We have to check, I said, pulling on my coat. I won't be able to sleep now anyway. Sam groaned, but ultimately nodded and got his gear on. Flashlights in hand, we crept out into the darkness. There was no sign of dawn. I knew Sam was right. We should have waited. But I'd waited before and missed countless chances. I wouldn't make that mistake again. Living meant more than simply surviving. You still think it might have been a ventilation panel? I asked. He nodded. It's mangled, but it had that shape. So maybe we can track down the vent system, I said. Sure, but this bunker might be huge. How do we find the vent? You're not seriously going to dig more in the middle of the night, are you? He asked. The panel's already broken off. Someone did the digging for us, I said. Remember, a fresh 48 hours of snowfall could bury anything that was exposed, Sam pointed out. I know, I said. Some 30 yards from our tent was a small orange flag, marking where we'd found the panel, our starting point for the excavation. The post and its flapping nylon were themselves buried under thick layers of white. What are you hoping to find? Sam asked. Think about it, I replied. A vent system with no panel. That might be another way into the bunker. Wait, Sam muttered, pointing at a rocky outcrop about 30 yards higher up the slope. Do you see that? I narrowed my eyes through the snowfall and caught sight of what he'd spotted. Reddish streaks, staining the snow at the base of the limestone. I shuddered. Is that? Blood, Sam said flatly. I was wrong about the animal. It's not harmless. We need to get out. I shook my head. I'm not stopping now. Don't be reckless, Danica, he urged. You're not following that. But I was already trudging through the deep drifts, flipping on my flashlight as soon as we left the area lit by our floodlight. You know I can't just let you go alone, Sam said, close behind me. Please, go back, I pleaded. I just want to see what's up there before anyone else does, Sam. But I don't want you risking yourself. You've done enough. Naturally, my partner ignored me, and we trudged on together, bracing ourselves against the gale. The bloody trail went on for hundreds of feet, painting an eerie path across the snowy cliff face. Eventually, it ended at a hole in the rock, an opening of twisted metal. I was right, I panted. This structure is bigger than we ever thought. I'm not sure how I feel about this, Sam muttered. We should wait for Tony and the others. By sunrise, they'll be here. I'm going in alone, I said. I already feel bad enough about making you camp on this icy mountain. Don't be silly. I chose to stay. This matters to me too, Danny. But if someone ripped off that vent from inside... Sam trailed off, exhaling. We've been outdone on this discovery, Danica. It's over. I'm sorry. I shook my head. Look at that metal, Sam. It's bent outward. The vent panel was forced out from within. I shined my flashlight into the blackness, revealing a corroded vent shaft, a metal tunnel full of twists and turns. I ducked slightly, but it was tall and wide enough to move through. Danny, please, Sam said, grabbing my arm. Don't go. The blood... Whatever it is, it's inside, I said, gently slipping free of his grasp. Go back and call Tony, Sam. I'll come back in half an hour or so. I just have to look. This is the biggest find in modern archaeology. Sam, however, didn't turn around. Our boots squeaked on the snowy threshold, along with the squelching noise of something, blood or something else, underfoot. The stench is horrible, Sam murmured, his voice echoing within the steel corridor. At least it hides your body odor, I teased. Oh. I halted a few inches from a gaping hole in the vent's floor. If I'd taken one more step, I would have dropped straight through. Sam and I angled our flashlights downward and spotted a tiny bedroom below, maybe old soldiers' quarters. Inside stood bunk beds, built from rotting boards with moldy mattresses. The horror of our discovery sank into my bones. I sensed something truly wrong about this place. Sam must have noticed I was frozen solid. "All right, you've seen enough. Let's get out of here," he pleaded. "This is messed up." "No animal tore open this hole," I said. "No person either." "All the more reason not to jump down," Sam insisted. "We need to go before we find whatever did that." "I'm going," I said. "I'll just take a look around this first room, then we head back." "You stay topside," I added, scooting forward so my legs could dangle. "I won't help," he said. "Well, it's going to hurt when I land," I shrugged. Sam sighed, realizing I wasn't bluffing, and set his flashlight on the floor of the shaft. He braced me by the arms as I slid over the edge. I felt like some reckless kid, stepping a foot outside the safety of my blanket, daring the monster under the bed. My foot touched the top bunk, and I lowered my second leg. I nodded, and Sam let go. I yelped as the decaying mattress and boards gave way beneath me. "Danny!" Sam cried. He snatched up his flashlight and jumped down into the bedroom with a heavy thud. As I sat there dazed in a pile of mildewed bedding, I realized Sam was limping toward me. "You all right?" he grimaced, helping me stand. "I'm okay," I said. "You?" "Twisted my ankle, I think," my partner muttered. I winced. "Oh, Sam, I'm sorry. You were right. This was too dangerous. Let's get you out of here." He shook his head. "I can still boost you up, but you won't be able to lift me, no offense." "But you need help. What if it's broken?" I asked. "There's not much we can do now," Sam shrugged. "Hence why I said we should wait till morning." "I know," I said, hugging him. "I'm sorry, did I mention that?" "You did, but not enough," he teased, though his face twisted from the pain. "Still, you were right too. This place is real, and it's amazing." "Are you going to keep saying that?" I laughed. "Take the win," he said. "All right," I said. "I told you so." "Will you keep saying that?" he joked, grinning. For a moment, we forgot the noises from the mountainside, the blood in the snow, the dark figure I glimpsed from afar. None of it mattered. Sam and I were explorers again, blind to danger, reveling in discovery. "All right, let's get you back to that vent shaft," Sam said. "Grab Tony. He can haul me up. The dude's built like Popeye." "Wait a sec. Look here," I said. On a small side table at the end of the wrecked bunk lay a dusty, leather-bound journal. I puffed away spider webs and brushed off a stubborn spider. The diary was written in old-fashioned American English, but I could read it just fine. The Diary of Conrad Vogel, January 2nd, 1948. It's been almost 3 years since we lost the war. Commander Myers still insists the surface is too dangerous. The president lost the global conflict, but roaches remain, some unstoppable force out there that wants to erase us. The country is in chaos. That's why we have to stay hidden, waiting for reinforcements, tucked away here in Fort Hawkstone, our leader's greatest fortress. I do have my doubts, but I won't say them out loud. Even writing such things could end my life, but I have to get these thoughts out or lose my mind. Private Fisher died this morning. While clearing out his quarters, I found this empty notebook among his things. Strange, he never used it. It's a sign. God wants me to do more than rot in this hellhole. So, let me just put it bluntly. Either the war still rages, or we lost it. But we sure didn't win. Then why do we hide? February 27th, 1948. It's harder to keep a diary than I thought. Even when you have nothing to do, the mind wanders. It wanders to strange places. One of the greenhouse rooms malfunctioned last week. Don't know why. Fort Hawkstone is filled with advanced machinery I don't understand. There are dozens of other greenhouse rooms, so we won't starve just yet. I guess it doesn't matter, as long as I get my share, but I can sense people's anger boiling up. Fearful folks are dangerous when locked in a cage. Sure, we still have food, but how long can we stay down here? If more greenhouse rooms fail, eventually we'll be stretched thin. I voted to stop feeding the prisoners. I don't share our leader's ideals, though that's treasonous to admit. Still, I hate anyone who fought against us. Let them starve. Commander Meyer told us the greenhouses wouldn't fail. He told us this fortress was built to last 1,000 years. A load of lies. March 12, 1948. Another greenhouse shut down. That makes 2 in as many months. Nobody's starving yet, but the mumbling grows louder. I hate the thought of an uprising underground. Not much else to report. Charlotte and I have been sneaking around to my room when my bunkmates are out. She's a terrible nurse, but a wonderful lover. August 15th, 1948. Some of the privates left Fort Hawkstone last night. Cowards. I don't believe our dear leader's cause either, but I love my country. I'll never abandon Fort Hawkstone. I'll never betray the place I call home. December 25th, 1948. This is the first Christmas we've celebrated in a decade. Commander Meyer senses the unrest, so to ease our dangerous thoughts, he let us honor the holiday. Our great leader wouldn't approve of anything that gave us hope. Maybe he's not here. Maybe he's dead. June 21st, 1951. I'd forgotten this old diary. Life got in the way. Death got in the way. In these past 3 years, more greenhouses have failed. Like I said, rations have begun. So much for a fortress lasting 1,000 years. Many soldiers tried to revolt, were executed, and became martyrs for the next wave of rebellion. A grim cycle that never ends. Uprising, dying, uprising, dying. We resent the prisoners, more mouths to feed, enemy mouths. But Commander Meyer says, a prisoner is power. Why do we need hostages if we were the victors? Feels like more lies. I've known it for years now. The war is over. We lost. December 1st, 1951. Our people are getting sick. Women, too, though they're prioritized. The starved ones are the sickest. I guess even Commander Meyer has realized the difference between ideology and survival. The prisoners are underfed and living in filth, so they're the ones most vulnerable to disease. He says, we still need them alive. Each prisoner's a bargaining chip. Sounds like something you do when you've lost a war, not won it. March 12, 1952. Dr. Klein says many of the ill have tuberculosis, the White Death, an ancient disease. Before I came to Fort Hawkstone, I remember talk of a possible cure, but if it exists, it sure isn't down here. The sick just get sicker. We're stuck in a tin can. March 30th, 1952. The sick were moved to the Western Wing, the Armory. They set up a separate ward for the sick from our side and one for the prisoners. We isolated them until they die. They're left with enough supplies to drag it out. All I can think is fewer mouths to feed. Good. Yes, I know that's cruel, but I'm out of compassion in this place. July 10th, 1954. 2 years can bring so much change. Found this diary again while packing my bunkmate's things. He hid it under his mattress. Didn't do him any good in the end. He died of the White Death. We isolate the sick again and again, but it always comes back. Dr. Klein is running tests, claims he's close to a cure, begs Commander Meyer to let us leave. He, too, knows the war ended. But he's too afraid to go out on his own. I don't think anyone actually leaves. November 2nd, 1955. I have a reason to dig up this diary once more. Charlotte gave birth to our child, one of only 20 children born in the decade we've been hiding in this bunker. I named him Fritz Vogel. I fear for his life. I don't want him to be a soldier. I don't want him in this place. I pray that Commander Meyer ages out soon, because his authority is the thread holding all of us here. Without him, maybe we'd dare to leave. Very few here still cling to the leader's cause. November 16th, 1956. Every year slips by. You'd think time would crawl in a bunker, but no. Time doesn't exist here. Fritz is our only hope, Charlotte's and mine. We're among the lucky ones. Our population keeps shrinking. A decade ago, there were 1,000 people in this underground city. Now, 600 remain. The White Death comes and goes. Whenever we believe it's gone, it takes another dozen lives. Dr. Klein promises he's near a breakthrough. He only experiments on the prisoners, so he says. I'm sure that's more dangerous than he admits. We shouldn't be keeping them alive. Put a bullet in their heads and be done with the risk. Doctors always overthink. Life isn't that complicated. Klein will get us all killed. May 7th, 1961. Seems I only write in this thing on important milestones. This will be my last. The White Death finally got me. I requested a bullet for tonight. I want to be cremated, not turned into Dr. Klein's next experiment. I don't trust that he only tests on prisoners. He's been claiming a cure is near for 7 years. All I see are more corpses. He's a liar. I only pray I haven't passed anything on to Charlotte or Fritz. I'm no saint, but they are good. Charlotte is devoted to healing people, though she's not the best nurse, bless her. And Fritz, he's got a gentle soul. He deserves better than this existence. I pray this place doesn't devour him whole once I'm gone. Here, the final entry by Sergeant Conrad Vogel ends. I turned the page and found something unexpected. The Diary of Fritz Vogel. October 27th, 1973. My name is Fritz, and I'm not sure if anyone will ever read my father's diary, or these entries of mine. I found his diary while packing up my belongings. I'm moving to new quarters in the South Block. Mom's sad I'm leaving, and I'm terrified. But I'm 18 now. I knew this day would come. Commander Meyer still says men must be soldiers, and women must be nurses or teachers. It's been that way for 30 years. Life here feels meaningless. So few of us remain. It's bizarre reading my father's accounts of a once thriving bunker. He mentioned 1,000 people. Now we're at 500. The White Death still lingers, but it's not the threat it once was. Sure, we lose folks every year and not many births happen. People just aren't eager to bring new life into this hole. September 1974. I only remember this journal when my heart's full of turmoil. My father was right. Writing is the only thing that keeps us sane. I started working in the lab with Cuckoo Klein, and that's what my friends call him. He seems all right, though. Maybe I'm reading too much of Dad's notes. He talks about a brilliant but obsessive scientist. But the old man I see is, well, half lost. Rumor says he still experiments on prisoners in the abandoned Western Ward, but that's nonsense. They all died ages ago. Commander Meyer keeps telling us the war's ended, so there's no point in wasting resources on the enemy. Meyer's a different man from the one my father described. He's getting old, too. February 1975. I was excited to work in the lab. Sounded better than patrolling corridors or cleaning latrines, but I'm starting to think my friends were right. Dr. Klein's a bit deranged. He says strange things like, "You're sick, but I'm keeping you healthy." Lena told me he says the same to her. She's the only reason I'm not losing my mind. December 1976. Mom passed away. She got the White Death. Dr. Klein said old folks can't fight it off, not like us post-war babies. I begged the commander to place me somewhere else. It took all my willpower not to punch the doctor in the face when he made his cold remark about Mom. November 1989. 13 years gone in a blink. Feels like a lifetime, though. It's fitting to return to this diary at another crossroads. A lot has changed at Fort Hawkstone. I'm now Colonel Fritz Vogel. I work as the right hand to Commander Braun. Not that we have many people to command. Only around 100 men, women, and children remain. Dad wrote about revolutions and deserters, but we don't fear that anymore. Anyone left is either too old to travel or too accustomed to life here. Braun and I have discussed leaving. But where would we go? The world outside doesn't belong to us. Our great leader is gone. Commander Meyer confessed on his deathbed that the war ended decades ago. He forced us to remain, feeding us fear. That wasn't even his darkest secret. Apparently, the prisoners, plus their children, still live in the armory. For 35 years, Dr. Klein's been experimenting on them, trying to cure the White Death. The rumors were all true. He never succeeded, but he developed a treatment that's been given to us in small doses from birth. That's why so few of us get sick. Dr. Klein found a partial solution, mixing those treatments into our food. It doesn't work on the elderly, and it only works on the young if they started early. That's why older folks still die. Meanwhile, Dr. Klein has somehow lived through 4 decades of close contact with infected patients. Must be the luckiest man alive, or not. He's probably well into his 80s. August 1992. Lena and I just had our daughter, Ella. She's the 3rd generation of the Vogel family to live in this damned place. A miracle by today's standards. Only 72 people remain. Most of the older generation has died, yet Dr. Klein survives. It's like he has a hidden portrait in his closet, aging on his behalf. April 1995. You must see my work. He said that to me again today. Dr. Klein's been pushing for me to visit the quarantined armory for years. I've refused. A couple of months ago, Commander Braun finally looked around there. Whatever he saw rattled him, and not long after he ended his life. We have no commander now. I don't want the same fate. Klein's told me more than I cared to hear. It's bad enough knowing we keep entire families of prisoners in cages, 5 decades after the war. Soldiers, civilians, children, grandchildren. Lena and I believe none of that old ideology. We don't care about the illusions our leader had. We suspect we were on the wrong side of history. We also have fewer people left who can keep this fortress going. Fewer who know how to repair the machines and run the greenhouse rooms. Since Commander Braun passed, I've ended patrols. Why bother? This is no army, just frightened souls, too terrified of the outside world to leave. Worst of all, the White Death has returned. December 1996. I finally caved to the doctor's demands and joined him in the quarantine zone, the old armory. This past year claimed the last of the original bunker residents, except Dr. Klein. About 50 of us remain, mostly under 40. Nobody here knows the real world beyond Fort Hawkstone. The end is near, I've accepted it. But before I died, I had to know the truth. And it was worse than I ever imagined. None of the original prisoners remain. The ones left are descendants of the captured Americans and other alleged enemies, raised here for decades, never seeing outside these cages. Our side's section of the armory is empty. No infected soldiers survived. But that's not what horrified me most. In the prison block, Klein showed me cages of children. They were bloated beyond recognition. Not just around their stomachs, but limbs and faces too. Their skin was black and green, swollen with something like gangrene. The doctor ignored my shock and began jeering at them, hurling insults, spitting in their cages, declaring them vile abominations. He insisted this was God's punishment for their heritage. The kids said nothing in return, only stared at us with glassy, pained eyes, silently begging for release. I lost control. Before I realized it, I pulled out my father's old revolver and fired all 6 shots into Dr. Klein's back. He didn't die quickly, more like an animal than a man. Who knows what unnatural experiments he performed on himself to stay alive this long? Even as he lay bleeding, he gave me a twisted grin and told me a horrible secret. Klein found the cure for the White Death before I was even born. A cure he's injected in the newborns for decades. The treatments he secretly put into our food, they're permanent. But they come with a terrible price, which he was perfecting on those children in the cages. Their black flesh, their ballooned bodies, that's the side effect. He fused the disease with the host, so the infection and the body keep each other alive. But that's no cure, it's an atrocity. He only prevented the same twisted transformation in us by regularly dosing our meals with some neutralizing agent. Now that he's gone, there are no more treatments. I turned the page and found only crazed scribbles, random drawings, and the occasional half-legible phrases: warm, warm, eat warmth, eat water. A chill ran through me as I remembered the ominous shape I'd glimpsed near our tent. That giant figure, striding through the snow. Clearly, at least some of Fort Hawkstone's inhabitants survived. "Sam," I whispered, trembling. Tony Flores came, along with Andy Becker, around 6 in the morning. The storm hadn't let up, and Tony's temper was just as fierce. I heard him before I saw him, bellowing over the wind, and I unzipped the tent. 2 figures stood under the glare of the floodlight. "Where is he?" Tony roared. I'll show you," I muttered, stumbling out. We hurried up the mountain, following that trail of dried blood against the rock face. By now, mostly smothered under fresh snow. I kept a brisk pace, dreading Tony's scolding. Arriving at the vent shaft's jagged entrance, I remembered I hadn't told him about the horrific revelations in the diary. This was decades ago, I reassured myself. Nobody but Sam is down there now. "What were you thinking?" Tony yelled over the gale. "I asked him not to follow me," I said meekly. "How is that any better?" Tony demanded. "Then you'd be the one stuck down there, and he wouldn't even know." "It's done now," Andy said softly, trying to calm him. "Not till we find him," Tony snarled, stepping inside the jagged hole. I followed the angry man, with Andy on my heels, through the narrow metal tunnel. A minute later, we stood at the gap above the bedroom. "He's down there," I said, as Tony shone his light in. "We're here, Sam." No response. Before I knew it, Tony jumped through the hole. He landed gracefully on the bunkroom floor, prompting Andy and me to gape in surprise. "He's not here," Tony growled. "Wrong room, Miss Craven." "What?" I peered down. "No, it's the right one. That's the bunk that gave way earlier. This is where he was, Mr. Flores." My heart pounded. The diary's words rattled in my mind like a menacing echo. I thought about the lost underground society, about Colonel Vogel, about what might have happened after his final entry in 1996. That was almost 30 years ago, I told myself again. They're all dead. "Well, he's gone," Tony snapped. "Did he decide to take a stroll, huh?" I don't know," I whispered. "And the door's open," Tony said. "Was it open before?" "I'm not sure," I said. "Maybe. No, it wasn't." "Right, so he's somewhere inside. You have any clue about the hazards lurking around here?" Tony barked. I stuttered. "I'll pay extra if—" "Pay me more?" Tony shouted, furious. You think money covers this? This bunker's nearly 100 years old, rotting from the inside out, and it'll kill us if we're not careful. Is that what my life's worth to you, Miss Craven? A few extra bucks? Calm down, Tony, Andy said. We'll go down, then. Of course you will come down, Tony hissed. How else am I supposed to sleep at night if Sam's on my conscience? We have to find him. He spread his arms wide, gesturing for me and Andy to join him. Jump, he ordered. I think maybe just you and I, Andy began. Number she's coming, Tony snarled. I didn't argue. I swung my legs over the gap, letting Andy catch me under my arms. He held me roughly, as if punishing me. Then he gently helped Andy down. Sweeping my flashlight around, I saw the bunk room look the same, except for the open door. No footprints from Sam, at least none that jumped out at me. Lead the way, Miss Craven, Tony said, nodding to the door. I swallowed hard, terrified that my flashlight barely dented the waves of blackness. As I moved past the threshold of room 421, I emerged into a forgotten corridor lined with doors. I glanced back to the bunk room door, reminding myself of the number. I wanted to keep track of how to get out. How do we find him? I asked. I have no idea, Miss Craven, Tony sighed. I'm just a worker, not search and rescue. I figured we'd find a dude with a twisted ankle, help him up, and that'd be that. Maybe we should head back down the mountain, Andy suggested. Bring real help. Before Tony or I could respond, we heard a distant sound of pain. Could have been squeaking metal or a moan of agony. Craven, you said you saw something, Tony whispered. What exactly did you see? I swallowed, mind spinning. No, I'm not sure. Then a shrieking scream tore through the corridor, bouncing off the walls and jolting all three of us. It made my spine tingle. It was Sam. I respect your idea, Andy, but we're not leaving now, Tony said, raising his flashlight. That came from that direction. You can't be serious, the younger man mumbled. I didn't sign up for this. You said we'd be lifting a guy out of a hole, not chasing after some monstrous howls. It's Sam, I insisted, my voice catching in my throat. No, Andy said, shaking his head. I mean the other noise. Before Sam, I knew exactly what he meant, but I couldn't bear to think about it. I want to know what tore that vent shaft apart, Tony said. I can't imagine anything, Miss Craven, and you're looking paler by the second. Once more, what did you see? I'm not scared of what I saw, I said shakily, retrieving the diary from my pocket. I'm scared of what I read. Tony stared at me, as if sensing the gloom in my eyes. I probably shouldn't ask, right? He muttered. Let's find Mr. Langston and leave. Andy made a small protest, but Tony marched down the corridor determined to follow the faint groans. Oh, God, Tony gasped, coming to a sudden stop. He didn't have to explain. Our lights landed on a decaying army uniform lying in a mound of dust on the floor. Its owner had disintegrated over time. And as we progressed, we saw more uniforms sprawled on bunks through open doors. Eerie remains of what must have been the fortress's original inhabitants. I recalled Fritz's final revelations about Dr. Klein's so-called cure. Cafeteria. Tony read off a sign. I'm guessing that means mess hall? I nodded, and our makeshift leader guided us along a corridor labeled with that sign. My gut twisted at leaving the main hall, but we had little choice if we wanted to follow Sam's path. Dear Lord, help us, Tony breathed, shining his light across the deserted dining room. Long tables lined the hall, and many battered uniforms lay across the benches. No longer soldiers, but just rotted scraps, testaments to a lost era. Fresh footprints in this dust, Tony said, pointing at the floor. Sam's close. Andy spotted a door across the mess hall. That way. We hurried through, and I shivered at the sight of at least a dozen vacant uniforms. But they weren't truly vacant. The ashen remains of the fortress dwellers lay scattered inside. My greatest dread, however, lingered beyond. The cafeteria opened onto a hall, and Tony read another faded sign. "Armory," he said. "Arrows pointing left. What's that mean, Miss Craven?" I forced a swallow. "The armory. Well, the trail leads there," Tony pointed out. "No," I said, shaking my head. "Not there. We have to leave." "What?" Tony glared. "We're not abandoning Mr. Langston." "I don't want to leave him," I said, trembling, "but I don't want anyone else." "What?" Tony growled. "Tell me, you're keeping secrets." A fresh, unholy roar boomed from the end of the hallway. There were no doors on either side, just a single battered door at its conclusion. The armory, the war prison for those cursed by the White Death. Tony and Andy started moving, and I stumbled forward despite my terror, the two men forging ahead in determination. They had no idea what awaited. They just wanted it done. It would be. Soon. When we got to the door reading "Armory," we saw it had been ripped from its hinges, rotten boards strewn about. Darkness yawned beyond. The remains of the barrier bobbed lightly in the draft. We entered a cramped passage lined with metal cages. Inside each caged section, battered wooden crates of ammunition and tarnished rifles remained, along with filthy mattresses. More crumpled uniforms. This was the first stage of the quarantine zone, the American side. Then came a faint noise, a soft whine like a wounded dog, labored sobbing. "Something's in here," Andy whimpered, voice quivering in the echoing corridor. That single phrase silenced the whimpering. A shadow flickered across the wall, a shape just out of reach of Tony's flashlight. For a moment, all was still. No movement, no sound. A false calm, as if we were in the eye of a storm. Then came a moan from somewhere above and a thud. Something dropped between us and the exit. We turned to face the thing that had trapped us. Darkness lunged forward. A colossal figure charged, humanoid but so large it scraped the ammo cages as it came. Its decaying flesh squirmed, ballooned and folded from monstrous swelling. A horror that should never have walked Earth's surface. Nothing in Fritz's final entry prepared me for such an abomination. Its diseased skin oozed black rot and pus, and its eyes were gray, bulging like cloudy balloons, but it sensed us. The thing swiped for my screaming face, tearing into my cheek. I braced for death, hoping it would be quick. Instead, Tony Flores threw himself in front of me. The beast seized him faster than I could blink. It was a hideous demon, swollen beyond natural limits, somehow held together by rotting flesh riddled with stretch marks. "Run!" Tony yelled, grappling with the creature that had once been human. Andy and I bolted, tears streaming, as behind us we heard squealing, crunching, and guttural growls, ripping flesh, breaking bones, that awful, inhuman breathing. Andy's torch cut ahead of us, and we saw a door at the corridor's far side, just as the horrible sound ceased. We sprinted, and Andy slammed his shoulder against the door. It gave way, and we stumbled inside. Behind us came a frenzied shriek, some unearthly cry belonging to neither man nor beast. "Lock it!" Andy yelled. I shoved the door shut, fumbling with the rusty lock until it clicked. Then I turned to see an area that matched Fritz Vogel's text perfectly. A second row of cages, nearly identical to the first, except the American side had extra comforts. Here, in the prisoner wing, cages were disgusting, filled with filth and leftover uniforms with stenciled numbers. American or Allied soldiers, maybe. families locked away for decades. A dreadful revelation. "What does that diary say?" Andy asked, his voice trembling. "You don't want to know," I whispered, tears on my cheeks. Tony was right. Andy nodded in panic, and we walked further into the corridor, lined with cages that had once housed human lives. Now, nothing remained but rags, rubble, and the smell of despair. Then we heard a raspy breathing sound. "Do you hear that?" Andy asked, voice shaking. "It's like breathing," I groaned in horror. I expected another ghoul lurking at the far end, but realized the sound was to my right. Lifting my flashlight, I shone it between warped steel bars. Two figures lay there, wearing tattered prisoner uniforms soaked in blood. Their bodies had grown grotesquely swollen, bursting the seams of their clothes. Worst of all, they had fused together. Their flesh molded like lumps of clay, joined into a single monstrous shape. Two mouths opened in unison, black and toothless. "Warm," they moaned. "Eat warmth." The insane scribbles in Fritz's last pages came flooding back, sending my mind into shock. Those same words. "No." Andy whimpered, highlighting a dreadful sight on the floor. I recognized the shredded remains. A twisted shape, another mound. Sam. He'd been torn in half at the waist, entrails connecting the two halves. I wailed, mind reeling, as I gazed at my friend's mutilated corpse. I couldn't begin to imagine his final, agonizing moments. And when I saw chunks of flesh missing, with fresh blood smeared on the fused prisoners' mouths, I grasped the entire, terrible truth. Eat warmth. A thunderous crash behind us jolted me from my thoughts. "It's trying to break through," Andy whimpered. I was half delirious, but he grabbed my shoulders, forcing me to look at him. "Danica," he said gently, "I'm getting you out. When it passes your cage, you run." I couldn't answer. Tears dripped from my vacant stare. He shoved me into an open cage across the corridor, switched off my flashlight, and held a finger to his lips. Moments later, the creature charged in, a massive silhouette bounding past me. Andy was at the other end, waving his torch. "Hey!" he yelled. It was over in seconds. The balloon-like monster, unholy in every sense, barreled down on him. Andy vanished under its crushing weight, and the air filled with the sound of tearing, snapping bones. He had no chance to scream, but that wasn't why my mouth gaped in terror. On the creature's bare, diseased back, I saw 6 circular scars, shaped like injection sites. Not him, I thought, trying not to scream. I ran. Faster than my body should have allowed. I was sure it would come for me before I reached the cafeteria, let alone the bunk room, but it never pursued. By the time I snapped back to awareness, I found myself in room 421, staring at the hole above. I don't recall how I got there. I must have stepped over Tony's half-eaten corpse, though that memory is mercifully blurred. My mind blacked out parts of the trauma as a defense. I dragged the remains of the collapsed bunk beneath the vent opening, climbed onto it, and pulled myself into the metal duct. Sobbing and shattered, I navigated the winding corridor until I finally emerged into a world lit by the faint glow of sunrise. Red tinted the clouds, and the storm had calmed to a gentle flurry. The mountain lay in silent majesty, clueless about the nightmare beneath its crust. I staggered down the slope, eventually dropping onto the highway leading into the small mountain town. I was a wailing, incoherent mess. A local motel clerk found me, drawn by my cries breaking the dawn quiet. I told them everything. I didn't care how deranged I sounded. They'd see for themselves once they investigated Fort Hawkstone, and, in a sense, they did. When they pried open the bunker door and explored, they found much of what I'd described. The tattered uniforms, the ruined vent shaft, the blood, even the remains of my team. But there was no trace of the monsters. They'd escaped. The psychiatrist keeps insisting they never existed. Officially, the others were crushed by a ceiling collapse in the armory. That's the official story, but I know better. I know what I saw. I have the diary. Most of all, I have the scar on my cheek that still hasn't healed. It grows worse each day. My once blue irises are going gray. And there's a voice in my head I don't recognize. A voice that hungers for something beyond my understanding.